B.Scott from Hiram Club.
All right, y'all. Let's get this done. B.Scott, B-Block. Appreciate y'all for being here. Subscribe on the YouTube. And if you're not subscribed already, and check us out on the audio-only platforms. Got a chance to drop by NRG Stadium today. Didn't get to stay long. Couldn't stay the whole time. Shout out to the people that are either assigned or just have the free time to just be up there all the time, the way that they are doing the Lord's work. But we did a lot of, hand wringing and talking about doing the autopsy of the game last night. Stayed up pretty late, did a 2-hour stream about it, talked about CJ Stroud's struggles, talk about the disappointment of not punching in what felt like their best chance, taking advantage of their best opportunity to go to the AFC Championship game in that loss. And there's a lot to talk about throughout the offseason, where they go from here, what improvements they make, what subtractions they make, what additions they make. There's certainly going to be quite a bit of that, right? And we'll have time to do it. But one thing that I'm still kind of hung up on right now, one thing is the Joe Mixon thing. And we got a little bit of Joe Mixon insight, if you will, or at least he was asked about him. DeMeco Ryans was asked about him. And remember, this is somebody that didn't play for the Texans at all this year, despite I think most people expecting that he would come back at some point. I don't think even at the beginning of the season, when he was put on the injury reserve, that people thought that he was going to miss the entire season. And it was probably not until midway through the season when we actually started to accept that might be the case. So, and we got a lot of questions as well in the last live about, what do you do with Joe Mixon? Do you bring him back? What are your off-season priorities in terms of draft or free agency or, positions in need and that sort of thing? And running back is going to be one of those that is, I think, going to have to be looked at. Now, I say that as somebody that actually was a fan of the way the running back room ultimately ended up playing out, right? Like I liked Woody Marks when they drafted him. Never anticipated that they were going to have to rely on him to be their bell cow or their number one back. I don't think that they did either. And I like Nick Chubb as kind of a secondary back, some sort of a bruiser, somebody that could get you, if you needed 3, he could get you 3. If you needed 5, he could get you 3. Like somebody, and he did better than that. I shouldn't just reduce him to that because I thought he showed way more than what I expected of him, from being just completely honest about it. So I wasn't down on the running back room. I just thought that, it's just a clear difference. It's not even like a hot take to say there's a clear difference between what they had out there and what Joe Mixon could have provided them. So I thought it was interesting that we had a little bit of a back and forth, or was glad that we did at least have a little bit of a back and forth on Joe Mixon and what DeMeco Ryans talked about, what it meant not having him. He was asked about that by Jonathan Alexander, the Houston Chronicle. And there was some follow-up, too, from Aaron Wilson at KPRC about, like, what actually happened. Like, what happened to him? What's wrong with him? Do we have any clarity on any of that? And I want y'all to hear this exchange. It's about 47 seconds long. We got a couple of more that we want to play throughout the show from DeMeco Ryans. But let's listen to this real quick. And y'all tell me in the chat what y'all thought about this exchange between some of the media members and DeMeco Ryans talking about Joe Mixon.
You all kind of unexpectedly in the spring didn't have Joe Mixon. How much did kind of not having him maybe kind of hurt the offense, particularly at the beginning?
Look, when you have your best players, you're gonna be a better team. Like Joe was he's a really great running back for us, and not having him, yes, of course it affected our running game. And Joe was one of the top running backs in this league, so that affected us.
Just on that, do you expect a future with Joe here?
As of right now, I don't know that answer right now.
On that Joe Mixon topic, do you have any clarity on what is wrong with him and what it would take this offseason?
No clarity.
All right. So no clarity. No clarity. Not exactly sure what happened, but definitely needed him. Definitely missed him. Definitely wish he was out there. And I just find it interesting when you can talk about how important a player is, when you can stress how, and some of this is the obvious, stress how valuable that player is to what it is that you wanted to do. But when it comes to why that player wasn't available to you, what exactly happened with that player, you don't feel comfortable talking about it. And I'm not knocking him. I would imagine if I was in a similar position as DeMeco Ryans and Joe Mixon got injured unexpectedly, and we didn't have him for the offseason, we didn't have him for the preseason, and then it turned out we didn't have him for the regular season at all. When I was anticipating going into the year that I would have Joe Mixon on my team, and whatever happened did not happen, in front of like the public, right? It didn't happen in front of the world to see, right? I would probably be inclined to handle it similar to the way that DeMeco Ryans has, but I think this just really illustrates how frustrating of a point this is for the Texans offense and something that they didn't have. And then it just turns out to be one of the more confounding mysteries that we'll have that I can remember in Houston sports. And so the question obviously is what happens with Joe Mixon? Does he have a future here? And you heard DeMeco Ryans say there that he's not sure exactly what the situation is going to be. Joe Mixon, all of his guaranteed money is, ran through this season. So he's under contract technically for next season, but they could get out of it. It's not guaranteed. They could do something different with the contract. And they could just part ways, honestly, and see what happens with Joe Mixon. But I'm going to be monitoring this because I feel like wherever he goes, like the question for me now is, does Joe Mixon play again in the NFL? I certainly hope so. For a number of reasons. First of all, I really like watching Joe Mixon play football. He's a hell of a football player. But also, somebody's going to get a chance to ask about this. And he'll have the right to not say shit if he doesn't want to. And I don't be mad at people when they don't want to say, look, we get the people that ask the questions don't get to pick the answers. All I can do is ask the questions. You don't want to answer, you ain't got to answer. I can't make the man. Damn sure can't make the man. But I'll be curious to see whether that's Joe Mixon returning to Houston or Joe Mixon somewhere else. Wherever he ends up, people are going to have to ask about what the hell happened last year. You played in a playoff game. There was no indication that, to end one season, and then there was no indication that you weren't going to be around for the next season. And something happens in the off season, and y'all already look out. Y'all can do whatever y'all want in the chat, but I'm not going to speculate on what happened with Joe Mixon without having any kind of solid information on what happened with Joe Mixon. And nobody really wants to seem to give it up. But and look, some theories are out there. I understand that, but I'm not going to traffic in that. Like, it's just it is a confounding thing, that they didn't have this guy. I'll be interested to see what happens. But wherever he ends up, somebody's gonna have to ask about this, and we're gonna have to figure out exactly what happened. So, Champ Slice, hey, shout out to Champ Slice for coming through, man. Champ Slice be in the Sports Radio 610 YouTube chat. Always appreciated. He says, I think the no clarity was more of a let me just get out of this line of questioning and not an actual 100% Champ Slice. Look, DeMeco Ryans, I would bet my rent check or a rent check that DeMeco Ryans knows, or at least has a version of what happened to Joe Mixon. Like, I don't think he actually doesn't have any clarity. I think it's one of those situations where whatever clarity is not something that they want to provide to the public. And just the tone of that makes you feel like it's if not contentious, perhaps controversial, just something that they clearly don't want to share with the people. And I would say more importantly, are clearly frustrated by, because of what he could have meant to you. Like, could you imagine having Joe Mixon in a scenario where in these last two playoff games, one of which you were able to win because of the defense, but it would have been great to have been able to just hand the ball off to Joe Mixon when C.J. Stroud was fumbling and throwing the ball to the other team in both games, to have had that as an option. And they could not do that. That was part of the story of the game, kind of underrated. The story of the game, of course, was the turnovers, but underlying that was them losing up front and not being able to really run the ball, and at times not being able to protect C.J. Stroud the way that they needed to do. Arthur says that even Mixon couldn't run behind that line. Look, I'm not trying to defend the line, but I do think that it's worth noting that Joe Mixon made last year's offensive line look a lot better than it did. Remember the week 1 against the Colts? He was the offensive player of the week or whatever it was, and the majority of his yards that he got were after contact. And that ended up, I thought, being a theme throughout the season when he played. Now, you do make a good point, Arthur, about the pass D tackles living 3 yards deep. They deserve some credit as well. They do too, because they were very good. They are very good. Arthur earlier mentioned that this team is in no position to allow offensive talent to walk for free. Look, if this is in reference to Joe Mixon, which is what we're leading this thing off with, I think that, like, I'm right there. Depending on exactly what is wrong with Joe Mixon and like what is deemed he has left in the tank, or whatever the injury is, that left in the tank is probably not the right way to put it. Whatever the injury is, however severe it is it something that he can actually come back from? If he can, I would definitely be interested in having Joe Mixon back. Joe Mixon is actually my favorite offensive player on the team. My favorite offensive player on the team. For some obvious reasons, the talent, the ability, but there's also like an attitude and sort of an edge about Joe Mixon. Thought he was a tremendous leader for the offense as well. I feel like he provides something that nobody else on that offense quite provides to that degree and to that level. In terms of leadership, in terms of attitude, in terms of just having this sort of intangible edge to him that you really want from, I would say, all of your football players, but definitely your running back. I remember last year I used to say that I wish the offensive line took on the personality of the running back. That's how I felt about last year's offense. So Joe Mixon, I would say in order, my favorite offensive players on the Texans are, I would say, Joe Mixon, Nico Collins, and then Tank Dell. And so 2 of my 3 favorite players on this offense didn't even play for them this year. And could you just imagine if they had one of those guys? Champ Slice says that we can move forward with Woody and whoever they pick up moving forward. RB's come a dime a dozen. Joe was a better RB, but he probably won't be the same if the injury kept him out a full year. I think that's fair. I think that's a fair take. Now, running backs do come a dime a dozen. I agree with that, Champ, but let me just say I do think that Joe Mixon is a cut above the dime a dozen running backs that you're talking about. Now, to your later point here, though, if he's not the same, after this injury that kept him out for a year, then that would put him in that dime a dozen type of category. But if he is fully recovered, if all it just turned out to be was rehab and rest, and he's closer to, is it the Nick Chubb effect? Not to single out Nick Chubb like that, but is it the Nick Chubb effect, or is there something still there? You're probably right about it, though, in terms of how the injury ended up impacting. Front Runner says they seriously have to do something about that offense and running game. I think this is a big part of the offseason. Is like you can on the one hand look at them as a success story because the running back room did not look like it was supposed to look because of the Joe Mixon injury. And then the offensive line didn't even end up looking like how it was supposed to look because some of the signings and trades that they made, or I should just say signings, not trades, who were the offensive linemen that they traded for? No, I'm thinking about really Cam Robinson and Laken Tomlinson, who were supposed to be starters on this offensive line, and it just did not work out that way. And so from there, they ended up having to piece together the offensive line. And given that, okay, and I don't want to let them off the hook for the initial failure, okay, because that is of note. But given how that went, I thought they did a good job of piecing things together with the offensive line. We'll hear from DeMeco Ryans in just a second on what he said about that, because I asked him directly about the offensive line and what his assessment of them was. But I think that this is pretty key for them, especially if CJ Stroud is going to be, if there are going to be questions about CJ Stroud, and if he is somebody that you can win because of or just win with. I think that's probably sometimes a lazy way of putting it, but that's kind of how it came down to, or what it came down to in this in these playoffs. Because he turned the ball over as much, didn't even turn out to be somebody that you could simply win with. But when you factor in some of the excuses that you could put out there, they weren't healthy, they didn't have all their guys out there, all this other kind of stuff. Well, at that point, you got to become the guy that we win because of, right? It's okay if we got to shuffle things around, or if we don't have our best weapon out there. It turns out our best, at least one of our best offensive players is our quarterback. So yeah, I agree with Front Runner that they seriously have to do something about the offense and the run game, without a doubt. Let's see. So y'all heard DeMeco Ryans on Joe Mixon, which I thought was interesting. Wouldn't really want to talk about it, right? Didn't really want to go in depth about what happened. Just was willing to tell you that, yeah, we definitely missed dude. But listen to how different, and I always find this interesting how someone might talk about similarly situated folks differently. And I thought that's what happened here with DeMeco Ryans talking about Joe Mixon versus talking about Tank Dell, even though the obvious difference between those two is that one of their injuries happened in front of everybody, and the other one's injury, or whatever happened behind the scenes in front of basically nobody. But check out DeMeco Ryans answering the question about Tank Dell and whether he anticipates him being a part of, or how he anticipates him being a part of the receiving corps next year.
Do you have an update on how Tank Dell's process is going with his recovery and how he can factor into this receiving group next year?
Yeah, Tank has done a really good job with his recovery throughout the entire offseason. It's very tough when Tank has such a significant injury, right? And he was battling, trying to get back. He was working really hard to try to get back, at the end of this past season. That it just didn't work out that way. But he's showed up every day with a smile, with a great attitude, and I'm excited to see him back on the field next year.
All right, so, he's excited to see him on the field next year. Now, Tank Dell, of course, is under contract. And, as I kind of laid out there, Joe Mixon is technically under contract, but it's not guaranteed, and they can make a decision to move on. But, notice how he talked about him working to get back. Tank Dell had a catastrophic injury where it looked like he almost was maimed on television. And they talked about him trying to get back. We saw Tank Dell in the building quite a bit. He was around, he was present, he was at practices. There was never a question of, where is Tank Dell? What's going on with Tank Dell? We knew the situation, and it was always just kind of good to see him around, see him in good spirits and all that kind of thing. Whereas Joe Mixon, aside from that one time when I accidentally saw him, I guess I don't want to say accidentally, he was out in public in front of everybody to see, but we saw him in the concourse at the stadium at one of the games. And they kind of got this policy of not talking to the injured guys. I regret now not at least just walking up to him and saying, "What's up? How's it going? What happened?" Just to see what happened. Now, I doubt he would bite on that, but it would have been worth a shot in retrospect. But you see the difference between how one is talked about and how the other is talked about. So just two guys, and I point them out because those are two guys that could really change things, really change things for the Texans offense had they been healthy. I thought the offense did a lot of good things despite the fact that they were maddening and frustrating throughout the year, despite the fact that the numbers are not redeeming and that, most numbers will tell you that they were average at best. I saw some improvement. I saw some things that made me optimistic about them throughout the year or toward the end of the year. But then you always come back to, do they have the guys? Do they have enough guys? And they just didn't. We didn't. What's going on here in the chat about not knowing what went down? We don't know what went down. We don't know what went down. We've heard theories out there on the internet that we're not gonna, or at least I'm not gonna repeat, but we don't know what went down with Joe Mixon. We just know that it's an unfortunate situation that, in the year talking about how you wasted an incredible defensive performance, an incredible type of defense, what could have been a historic defense. You wasted an opportunity to take them or for them to take you to an AFC championship game. It was also just a lost Joe Mixon year. The last year guarantees on his contract, and that ended up being a part of the waste, All right, my bad, Champ Slice. I lost track of what was going on in the chat, man. But y'all fire away. So the next thing I want to go to is DeMeco Ryans on C.J. Stroud. And C.J. Stroud spoke for himself later on in the day. I had to get out of there by the time he got up there. But and there will be plenty of C.J. Stroud clips and stuff that y'all can find on Sports Radio 610. We handling that on their social media channels, and I'm pretty sure that y'all seen a lot of it. But I did want to play what Ryan said about Stroud because, I think it's important to hear how the head coach, who wants to be publicly, is a former player himself, right? So he's like a teammate sort of by nature and wants to be a good teammate. But when you probe him on some honest questions and try to end with direct questions and trying to get direct and honest answers, you do get a little bit. So this is a couple of minutes of, I pieced this together. There was a lot more on Stroud, but this is what I thought was the best of it that I pieced together and I thought was worthwhile for the audience to hear DeMeco Ryans on Monday talking about his quarterback.
Look, the quarterback position is going to get, the most eyes, most attention. We understand that. And in this league, that's what it is. And CJ understands that as well. I thought just throughout the season, I thought he did a really nice job of coming in, learning new offense, new scheme. Thought he picked it up well. We got better as the season went along. And, he made some plays to allow us to win a lot of football games as well. So I'm not going to let, the bad plays there in that game, really, for me, dictate to me who CJ is. I know who CJ is. I know what he's capable of doing. And so we just keep looking to get better. No one feels worse about the situation than CJ, right? He feels bad, for the team. I feel like he let the team down. And, I just told him, you keep your head up and you keep moving forward. Look, we all want it better. We can't go back in that game right now and run it back and play it again. Like, we just learn from it. Like, what do you learn from it? That's my main message to him is, what do you learn from that, and how do you make that a priority and getting it fixed and improving and getting better?
Message do you, will you, I don't know if you met with him yet, what will you give CJ on areas that you as the head coach want to see improvement in his position? Yeah,
I talked with CJ I talked with CJ today, and my message is the same. Right now, it's just about him just flushing this one. Right, it's going to be a lot of negative talk, a lot of attention on him. He can't listen to it all. Right? He just got to get back to work in the off season of going back to the basics, the fundamentals of playing the quarterback position, playing it really well, understanding how we need to play the game to win the game, right? And he understands that already.
I know it's still very soon after the game. In your estimation, is there a common thread for CJ's turnovers both in this game and from Pittsburgh as well?
I think each one was a little different. I think sometimes you just got to learn if the play is not there, right? Now, CJ knows that. He's trying to make a play. Play is not there. Sometimes you just got to dirt it. Sometimes you got to take a sack, even though you don't want to do that as a quarterback. It's just that's where the growth level comes.
All right, so the parts of that I thought were really good were where he's talking at the end about going back to the basics of the position, and then the part about realizing that a play is dead, that you got to just either take the sack or dirt it or whatever it is, like live to fight another down. And that is the most honest assessment and clearly what went wrong for CJ Stroud in both of these playoff games, both the one that they won and the one that they lost, in which he played poorly and gave up the ball at times when he didn't have to, unforced errors, right? There were just too many of those. And I want to say this about CJ Stroud, that the disappointing part about it more so than anything, but also the thing that makes you feel good, or I'll speak for myself, the thing that makes me feel good about him being able to respond and be better than he was these last couple of games is that, and I had Seth Payne on here talking about this a couple of weeks ago, that the story of CJ Stroud was really how much he adjusted to the way the offense required him to make good decisions with the football and not be so no risk it, no biscuit, right? Not be so daring, not try to force plays, not take unnecessary sacks, not hold on to the football for longer than he needed to, get the ball to the playmakers. If it's short, if it's intermediate, every play doesn't have to be a touchdown. And CJ Stroud, being the competitor that he is and being quite honestly, the talent that he is, feels himself capable of making incredible plays, and because he is incredible at making these incredible plays. But the charm of what they were able to do was have the quarterback who was capable of doing these things, but didn't feel like he had to, and did not force things, did not force plays, and more so prioritize having the ball and not giving the ball away. And he did that when DeMeco Ryans is talking about the fundamentals of the position, when he's talking about living to fight another down. CJ Stroud, that was the improvement that it seemed like he had made throughout the season. And so that part is both disappointing when you consider the performance, but also encouraging when you look toward the future and think, if you take him for his word, that, and I do, that he is going to do an honest assessment and some self-reflection on where things went wrong at the end, that he'll look at the way he played in those games not being nearly as close to the way he played in the games during the season, when his play didn't necessarily set the world on fire, but it was winning football. This part about dude being rattled at times, that's going to have to be addressed. Sensitive subject, talking about a dude's sensitivity or whatever the case may be. They're going to have to address that. Champ Slice says that he's been saying for the last year and a half that we don't win a Super Bowl with DeMeco as head coach. Man, I don't know how I come away from it feeling like DeMeco is the problem, right? DeMeco has led the team and been part of, do you get, does Nick Caserio put together this historic defense that DeMeco Ryans passed off to Matt Burke this year? Does it even come together without DeMeco Ryans and his vision for what a defense is supposed to look like and his input? I'm not sure that it does. I'm not willing to say that it does. You got Derek Stingley Jr. and Jalen Petrie on the team already. There's that. But drafting Will Anderson Jr., Daniil Hunter, bringing him in, Azeez Al-Shaair, okay? I feel like he's done enough to earn a little bit of equity with the people. Now the questions are still going to be there until they win that game, right? Like, it's not just like they can't win a Super Bowl with DeMeco, bro. It's the damn Texans, man. Bros ain't never been out of the divisional. Who do we think we are? We ain't been out of the divisional round, and DeMeco done got us the closest. DeMeco been on the closest that we been. He was on the team in 2011, and he done coached these last 3 teams. Nobody done brought you closer, probably, when you consider all of that. So I still believe in DeMeco, and honestly, I still believe in CJ as a talent. I'm just nervous about the big moments and it getting to the thing that I literally was not concerned about going in. I didn't think bro was overwhelmed. Then he went out there and looked overwhelmed as shit. So, Champ Slice, you don't mean this, dog. He say Butt Chin had us the closest. How so? How you figure? I know you're not talking about 24-0. I know you're not talking about 2019. It also the year that the damn Chiefs dynasty basically started. I know you're not talking about that year. Senior Buble says that DeMeco and Stroud are the reason this team has expectations. I cannot agree with that more because I was covering the team when David Culley was the head coach and Lovie Smith was the head coach, and they were trying to see what they had in Davis Mills. And it was a hard team to really talk about and make them interesting unless y'all were like us. I guess we're going to follow the team no matter what. But like just to make somebody casual want to come hear what you're talking about. You ain't know none of these players. You didn't feel like it was headed nowhere. And the last 3 years, it's been that way. Going into next year, it's not like CJ Stroud went out there and turned the ball over 100 times, and now you don't feel like the team is going to be good next year. I said it at the beginning of the year, and this is going to be like a theme until they disprove it. But at the beginning of the year, I said, man, the Texans going to be about the same as what they was last year and the year before. About the same. Because I wasn't overly impressed with what they did in the offseason and thought that they did just enough to stay about the same. And to their credit, they were better. I was wrong. They were better. They didn't win the division, but they won more games, and the defense was more ferocious. The offense wasn't as – the offense was probably about the same as it was last year, but it at least did some things where, they were, I thought, appropriately risk averse in some ways because in large part because of the defense. All right. If it wasn't the defense, then I probably wouldn't look at it that way. So let's go to DeMeco Ryans on the offense. Will Kunkel asked him about how he assessed the way the offense, and this is interesting to me because going into, let's say, even the live that we did yesterday, I didn't really feel like nobody's job was at stake. I didn't really have a good grasp for whether he might make changes. I assume that Nick Caley must gonna be back. But y'all listen to some of this and y'all tell me what y'all think about how DeMeco Ryans talks about the offense, how DeMeco Ryans talks about Nick Caley or doesn't. And then we got a couple of more here when I asked him, or at least one more here when I asked him about the offensive line.
How would you assess, just offensively, just the production on that side of the ball all year? Do you think they reached the potential that they wanted to?
I think our offense grew. It didn't start how we wanted it to start. So I think the guys got better as the season went along.
Pretty short answer there, wouldn't you say? I would say so. He was asked, Landry asked him about Nick Caley and his confidence in him. And this is what DeMeco Ryans said.
You made the tough decision to move on from Bob and make Nick OC. Are you confident in Nick getting better, and will he have that opportunity?
Yeah, with the coaching staff, with our players, you guys asking about contracts. coaches, play. Like, I'm evaluating everything as we go throughout the week.
I'm evaluating everything as we go throughout the week is not exactly a ringing endorsement, and is not what I was expecting to hear. This is going to come to the, I would say, satisfaction to a lot of people who want to see them make another change and want to see Nick Caley get out of there. But I didn't think it was happening or even had a chance of happening, much of a chance of happening, until I heard that back and forth. That was, I thought, newsy. I thought that was noteworthy. He did not make a ringing endorsement of the offensive coordinator himself. And then he also kind of gave a blasé compliment to the offense overall and how it improved. Right? You heard how, affectionately he talked about Joe Mixon and or at least how much they missed him. How he went into depth about Tank Dell and Tank's effort to come back, right? He said he thought the offense improved, which it did objectively, and didn't have much more for you than that. On the confidence in Caley that he can be better, I'm evaluating all of that throughout the week. So contrast that, though, to when I asked him about the offensive line and what he had to say about their performance and what he thought about them. Because remind you, this is one of the bigger stories of the season, right? It's Caley and the offensive line. It's the offensive coordinator and remaking the entire offensive line for the most part. I know Titus Howard was still there. But remaking the offensive line, taking out Laramie Tunsil, bringing in just a bunch of guys, so to speak, and then feeling like because Cole Popovich is being elevated from assistant to offensive line coach, that it would be better. Okay, so notice the difference, though, and we can debate on how much we thought the offensive line was better or not. Okay, I thought it was better. I thought that they gutted it out. I thought it was grimy, and I respected it, even though I'm not going to pretend like they were great. I respected what the offensive line did. But you heard him talking about Caley, okay? And we can play this one more time because it was short. This was Landry asking DeMeco Ryans about Caley. Let's compare these two.
You made the tough decision to move on from Bobby and make Nick OC. Are you confident in Nick getting better, and will he have that opportunity?
Yeah, with the coaching staff, with our players, you guys asking about contracts, coaches, I'm evaluating everything as we go throughout the week.
This was him with me on the offensive line.
The offensive line, that's something that y'all worked on in the off season, kind of remade it in a lot of ways. How would you assess the offensive line overall from start to finish?
I thought the offensive line did a really nice job, and I didn't think they get enough credit for the job that they did. Like, for the offensive line we were able to put together, everybody, a lot of people probably gave us slack for the moves that we made with our offensive line, and they played much better this year than we did last year. They got better. Coach Cole did a really nice job with the offensive line. The technique was better. They improved a ton, and they should get a lot of credit for that.
The technique was better. They improved a ton, and they didn't get enough credit and should get a lot of credit. It's a different tone. Found that interesting. See, I don't find everything from these press conferences to be interesting or worthwhile or noteworthy or even worth your time. Many of y'all might feel differently, and you're free to. But there are nuggets in there, the things that they say, the things that they don't say, and how they compare. And this was one that got me thinking, man, CJ Stroud, imagine this, how things have developed over the last couple of weeks here now, where when the season ended, even if you were complaining about CJ Stroud's play, even if you didn't like the offense and didn't like Nick Caley, you're probably like, man, we're going in here into this offseason paying CJ Stroud $60 million, extending his contract, not just picking up his fifth-year option, but extending this contract and going into another year with Nick Caley as the offensive coordinator. Now, you're not sure if you're going to do either. still going to pick up the 5th-year option. That part, I think, is a given. But what it creates, the environment it creates, is a prove-it year in 2026 that determines whether 2027 is just a lame duck year, or if they just move off of them entirely to avoid a lame duck year. 2026 is going to be everything for C.J. Stroud and his future in Houston. And might they do that with the same offensive coordinator or a different one? Y'all just heard from the head coach. Senior Bougle said, sound like he said the line was great and the scheme was ass to me. I mean, feel free to read between the lines as you see fit. Feel free. Won't tell you how to interpret things. But yeah, those were the things that stood out to me from the press conference. We're going to talk about the offseason plenty, a lot more to get into, not just that, but those are the things that stood out to me the most. We also talked in the locker room with Will Anderson, Kamari Lassiter. Since I gave y'all my favorite offensive players, before I leave out of here, I do want to mention my favorite defensive players on this team are Will Anderson Jr., Jalen Petrie, and Kamari Lassiter. Because I think just like Joe Mixon and Nico Collins specifically, they represent exactly what you want from not only a football player, but specifically from their position. You know, like Joe Mixon and Nico Collins are arguably like the creative player, the best of them, right? Them at their best. It's like creative running back. What would you want it to look like? Big, strong, fast, can run. That's Joe Mixon. How do you want your how do you want your wide receiver to look? I want him to be really tall, really fast, have great hands, and be awesome after the catch. There's Nico Collins. How do you want your edge rusher? I want him to be just as quick as he is strong, to have an incredible bull rush, to have an incredible motor, and to play the run and the pass with the same sort of intensity. Oh, bam, that's Will Anderson Jr. Like, you can just kind of go down the line. This was not all bad. This was actually more so good than bad. And I'll probably do something on that at some point, on how this Texans season was actually more good than it was bad, despite it ending in such terrible fashion. Champs Lights asks who I've got winning the Natty tonight. Let's get out of here so we can actually go watch that. I've got Indiana. And forgive me, I got family ties, okay? Got family ties. My grandmother went to Indiana. My father was born in Indiana. And as somebody that's got ties to Indiana, I cannot tell you how shocked I tell you I am that they got a football team that's damn good. I don't think that it's going to be particularly close. And I don't mean that as disrespect to Miami, because I think that they're really good too, especially up front, especially with Malachi Toney. I think Carson Beck has earned some respect as like a career college football player. He'll be one of those guys that we remember. I'm looking forward to the game, but man, Indiana is just a machine, bro. A machine. Good at basically everything. No weaknesses on this team. Smachinsky says Lassiter brings to the defense what Mixon had brought to the offense in the locker room. I can see that. I could definitely see that. But look, that's it for now, man. I enjoy it every time we get to kind of hang out, chop it up a little bit. Appreciate y'all for tuning in. We got Rocket stuff coming up this week as well. If you're a basketball fan, y'all stay locked in on that. But I'm also mixing some more Texans, all right? We're going to talk to Nick Caley on Wednesday. I imagine if we're talking to him as like a media at large on Wednesday, that he's probably going to be on Payne and Pendergast, and I just haven't heard about it. Ain't nobody text me from 16 about it yet. They probably should. So we'll see what's going on with that. But expect to hear from Nick Caley this week. And I don't think it's always necessary to hear from the GM, and I do appreciate the fact that he talks every week with like a scouting report, because of his, scouting and coaching background, he'll give you a pretty solid scouting report of the opposing team, which I think is pretty cool. But this is the time to talk to the guy that's in charge of putting the team together. So we'll see what he's got to say. In the meantime, y'all can subscribe to the B Block Podcast. Hopefully you're already doing that on YouTube. Do it wherever it is you get your podcast as well. Tell a friend, rate, review. And until next time, man, y'all be good.